The Italian Grand Prix at Monza isn't just another race on the calendar. For Ferrari, it's the race. The packed grandstands, the red flags waving from every corner of the circuit, and the pressure on the Scuderia are unlike anything else the sport produces. But this year, Ferrari isn't just showing up with hope and tradition. They're arriving with something that could genuinely shake up the entire championship picture. Multiple well-sourced reports coming out of Italy are pointing to a serious power unit upgrade being prepared for Monza. This isn't a minor tweak or a quiet mapping adjustment. We're talking about a completely redesigned turbocharger with projected performance gains of up to 30 horsepower. 30. In Formula One, where races are won and lost by fractions, that kind of number gets everyone's attention fast. If this upgrade performs the way Ferrari's engineers are expecting it to, it hands Lewis Hamilton and Charles Leclerc a real weapon, not a symbolic one. A weapon that could allow them to go directly at Mercedes and the young Kimi Antonelli in a way they simply haven't been able to this season. Today, we're breaking down exactly what Ferrari is planning, why they're fully within their rights to bring it under the 2026 engine regulations, and what kind of strategic chess match this could set up at the Temple of Speed. Stay with us, because this one gets interesting. Before we get into the upgrade itself, we have to spend a minute on the rules. Formula One is as much a legal and political sport as it is a racing one, and the regulations that govern engine development are some of the most hotly debated in the entire rulebook. So when people hear that Ferrari is bringing a major engine upgrade mid-season, the first question is obvious. How is that even allowed? The answer lives inside a specific regulation introduced for the 2026 season called ADU, which stands for Additional Development and Update Opportunities. This rule didn't appear out of nowhere. When the FIA and the team sat down to draft the new 2026 engine framework, everyone involved had the same fear sitting in the back of their minds. What happens if one manufacturer shows up with a massively dominant power unit that nobody else can touch? We've seen what that looks like, and it isn't good for the sport. To stop that scenario from happening again, they built in a safeguard. The FIA established what's called an internal combustion engine performance index. Every power unit on the grid gets measured, benchmarked, and ranked. If any manufacturer falls more than a set percentage below the established benchmark, they don't just get a pat on the back and better luck next year. They get formally granted specific development tokens that allow them to bring targeted mid-season upgrades and close the gap. It's a built-in performance correction system, and it's completely above board. The benchmark itself was set early in the 2026 season using Red Bull Ford powertrains as the reference point. Every other manufacturer's output gets measured against that number. When the FIA published its official power ranking earlier this year, the results weren't great for Ferrari. Their power unit was trailing the Red Bull benchmark by roughly 4%. That sounds small, but in Formula One terms, 4% of total power output is a meaningful, race-relevant gap that doesn't go away on its own. Because of that 4% deficit, the FIA legally granted Ferrari the right to execute 2 power unit upgrades across the 2026 season, plus 2 more in 2027 if they're still chasing that gap. It's not a loophole, it's the system working exactly as it was designed to work, giving manufacturers who fall behind a structured, regulated path back to competitiveness. Ferrari didn't wait around once those tokens were in hand. They got to work immediately, and their first upgrade, called ADU1 internally, was ready ahead of the Austrian Grand Prix earlier this summer. Now, ADU1 was not the big swing. It wasn't designed to be. Ferrari's engineers chose a conservative approach for the first package, focusing primarily on a newly developed shell fuel compound, along with some refined engine mapping adjustments. The result was a modest but real improvement, somewhere in the range of 5 to 8 horsepower depending on circuit conditions and configuration. Useful, but not the kind of number that changes a championship fight overnight. That was always the plan though. ADU1 was the foundation, the proof of concept, the first step in what Ferrari intended to be a 2-stage assault on the power deficit. And if the reports are accurate, what they're bringing to Monza is the second step, and it's a considerably bigger one. The engineers back in Maranello always understood that their first upgrade was just the opening move. The real firepower, the deep mechanical overhaul everyone was waiting for, was still coming. 30 horsepower in the middle of a Formula One season. That's the kind of number that makes engineers at rival teams sit up and pay close attention. Finding that kind of performance between race weekends outside of a full regulation reset almost never happens. It's not how the sport normally works, which is exactly why this story has the paddock buzzing. That said, there's a layer of caution that always has to come with numbers like this. A 3.0 horsepower gain on a dyno inside a controlled test facility in Maranello is not the same thing as a 3.0 horsepower gain on a racetrack on a Sunday afternoon. The real world is messier, and Formula One tracks are unforgiving. Battery deployment windows, long-run thermal management, cooling demands in dirty air, aerodynamic drag configurations, and the specific physical layout of each circuit all filter and dilute raw dyno performance by the time the stopwatch catches it. These are variables no engine bench can fully replicate. But here's what matters. If there is one track on the entire Formula One calendar built specifically to reward a jump in pure internal combustion engine power, it's Monza. Not just somewhat, dramatically and undeniably, known to everyone in motorsport as the Temple of Speed, the Autodromo Nazionale Monza is like no other track on the calendar. It's defined by massive flat-out sections that punish underpowered cars mercilessly, brutal braking zones that test both machinery and driver nerve, and ultra-low downforce setups that strip away aerodynamic grip in exchange for raw, straight-line velocity. Teams run their cars as slippery as physics will allow at Monza, which means the engine is carrying more of the load than at almost any other venue all year. At Monza, horsepower isn't just a nice-to-have. It shapes your qualifying lap. It determines whether you can defend into the first chicane when a faster car tries to dive up the inside. And it decides whether you have the pace to attack someone in a slipstream and actually make it stick. Every single horsepower Ferrari finds between now and September shows up louder at this track than it would anywhere else on the circuit. If ADU2 delivers even close to what's being reported, Italy could be a very different kind of weekend for the Scuderia. Let's talk about the numbers, because right now, they tell a very uncomfortable story for Ferrari. Mercedes are sitting on top of the Constructors' Championship with 379 points. Ferrari are chasing in second with 307. That's a 7-2 point gap. And at a race like Monza, every single point on the board matters more than it does almost anywhere else on the calendar. In the Drivers' Championship, the gap is even starker. Mercedes' young phenom Kimi Antonelli leads the standings with 219 points. Ferrari's Lewis Hamilton is behind him in second, with 169. That's a 5-0 point deficit. And while it's absolutely not insurmountable at this stage of the season, the window to close it is shrinking fast. Every race that passes without a Hamilton win is a race that brings Antonelli closer to sealing this thing. So, yes, Ferrari's new power unit matters enormously.